questions about history or social. Please like and subscribe to become a friendly neighborhood historian. Drop a comment, topic, or question in the chat about a historical issue you would like me to address. And let's see here. We're just getting started. We were doing a live stream earlier. The internet was acting kind of funky. We got it rebooted, so hopefully now it's working all right. And it's great to see everyone here. A happy weekend. We've got Solomon here. Who else is joining us? Solomon's one of my moderators. I'm good. How are you, Solomon? It's been a while. I haven't seen you around as much. We do live streams every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern where we answer all of your questions, and you can vote here on YouTube about the topic you would like us to do for our live stream lecture tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. And we also have short-form videos every day as well as long-form videos every Friday and Monday. Why was Applejack such a popular spirit hard liquor in the American colonies? Why did it fall out of fashion? I don't know. I think it was easy to brew. I think it's kind of like how it was kind of a time. It was a time restricted thing where moonshine obviously came up in a particular historical context, becoming popular during the time of bootlegging when people were making alcohol at home. I think Applejack was just the easy alcohol to make and access during the time of the American colonies. During the taxes that the British put on the American colonies that eventually led to the American Revolution, several different substances, including molasses, were taxed. So the making of alcohol might have been disturbed by that, so it might have been something that was easy to brew at home in the 13 colonies. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't read a lot about Applejack, but that is why moonshine becomes extremely popular because of the bootlegging movement and bathtub gin and things like this during the Roaring 20s when Prohibition ruled the day and speakeasies were quite common and alcohol was officially illegal, at least the sale and purchase of it. But that was eventually repealed in 1933, and alcohol is legal in many places, although there are still counties in the United States that are dry counties where you cannot purchase alcohol, or you can't purchase alcohol on certain days and certain times. Why did Achaemenid betray Oda Nobunaga? I don't know exactly why. I'm trying to remember exactly when that was. Are you talking about the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate at the beginning of the 17th century? I don't know why that betrayal happened. Which is also, by the way, the inspiration for the story Shogun, the famous TV series, two different famous TV series, and a book by James Clavell, a very good historical fiction source. Do you know Hadrian's lover Antonius? Romans made a cult of him when he died. I read Jesus' pretty face was based on Antonius. There's a rumor that Jesus' face is based on Caesar Borgia. There are depictions of Christ. That's probably Antonius is kind of earlier, so if there's anyone, that might be a basis for it. Mosaics were appearing of Christ in the 2nd and 3rd centuries already. This would have been after the time of Antoninus. I don't know exactly. I don't know how much there's a connection. The paintings of Jesus in medieval Europe are based usually on patronage, where a Renaissance painter would paint Jesus or one of the disciples. Usually Jesus would have his own face, but one of the disciples would have the face of a patron, somebody that had been hired by someone who had hired that painter. So the painter would put someone like the man whose son is healed of a demonic spirit. His face would be on the face of a man whose son is healed, and that would be his patron. That would be a way that he showed honor to the patron who paid him to make that painting. People like Leonardo and Michelangelo did this all the time. It was extraordinarily common in the 15th and 16th century with wealthy patronage families like the Borgias or the Medicis bankrolling the entire artistic development of the Renaissance, first in Italy and then in the northern parts of Europe, like the Netherlands and England. People like Hans Holbein and Peter Paul Rubens, some of the greatest artists of all time from Northern Europe. So there's some interesting stuff there. Now, Caesar Borgia was one such patron who supposedly became the basis for the face of Jesus, but faces of Jesus and depictions of Jesus had predated him by centuries, and many of the paintings of Jesus that you're probably thinking of do not resemble the Caesar Borgia painting. Albrecht Dürer, the famous sketch painter of the early 16th century from Germany, would have, or I think the Netherlands, had a self-portrait that looks very similar to paintings that we've seen of Jesus before. So it wasn't uncommon for artists to put themselves or their patrons in their works and to place them on the faces of disciples, different people in gospel stories or biblical accounts, but not usually on the face of God or Jesus. So There's a little bit of history of art for you here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Antoninus is obviously in much earlier sources the lover of Hadrian, who was basically treated like Hadrian's husband during Hadrian's 20-year reign. Antoninus was a lot younger than Hadrian and kind of following in the tradition of the Greeks, who Hadrian admired greatly. This was when Greek culture was really the most popular it ever had been in the Roman Empire. Having a male lover who was younger was very common for older men in Greek and later Roman society, and so Hadrian was acting out an ancient Greek fantasy in a Roman imperial context in the 120s and the 130s. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I hope you're all having a good Saturday, and if you enjoyed the history and the art that I was just talking about, consider liking and subscribing because we talk about stuff like that all the time. Jesus wasn't black. Nice guess, but no. Why did the Italians get off easy after World War II? Well, technically, I think it's World War III. In my opinion, there have been 3 world wars. The most recent world war was obviously the one with the Nazis. The reason was a lot of Italians fought with the Allies to overthrow the Italian dictatorship of Mussolini. Mussolini basically became a puppet of Hitler and the Nazis in order to keep a front fighting against the British and the Americans. And so basically, a lot of Italians jumped ship. And because of this, the Italians were not punished as heavily as Germany was and were rebuilt with the Marshall Plan and brought into the web of a Western European NATO alliances to stand as a bulwark against communism in the East at the rise of the Cold War. You look identical to Taylor Swift. You need glasses. Can you explain the history of capitalism in this country and its paramount to mix in socialistic programs and some aspects of communism, equality to prevent severe upheaval to sustain supremacy? I don't accept the premise of a question, Tom, but basically capitalism, the laissez-faire capitalism that people always worry about has really never fully existed. It's almost as idealistic as pure communism that it can't ever really be fit in at any particular point. America did get close to a laissez-faire capitalist system with the rise of the robber barons and the trusts and the monopolies of the late 19th century and areas like railroad, steel, oil production. These were eventually broken up and regulated during the progressive movement by presidents like Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, who basically decided that in order to save the capitalist spirit, there needed to be some government oversight over these things, basically ending any chance of laissez-faire capitalism in the United States by the early 1900s. Regulations, limiting the work week, child labor laws, all of these things were ways, you could say, that the government intervened to preserve the capitalist spirit, but also to make sure there was proper regulation of different industries. There was also workers' rights and guarantees, such as unemployment rights and insurance, as well as Social Security that was provided by FDR during the Great Depression. And these are more socialistic or seemingly socialistic elements that were bled into the capitalist economic system. So there you go. I'd rather live in broken capitalism than any other form of government. Capitalism can be very broken. And who was responsible for that, sir? Who was responsible for what? Who is Date Masamune? I don't know. I don't know everything. I know a lot about history. I'm a historian, and I'm hoping to answer all of your questions about history and social sciences, but I don't know everything. Let me see. Because capitalism is the only form of government where anyone can be rich. He doesn't matter who your parents were or your social economic class or your race. I've heard a lot of people say that capitalism, some people are rich and some people are poor. In communism, no one can be rich. And in socialism, some people can be rich, but no one can be poor. At least that's the goal that socialists will tell you. Byzantine Emperor Justinian almost reconquered the western half of the old Western Roman Empire. What stopped him? The plague. I'm reading Justinian's Flea by, I forget the name of the author, but he's talking about how Justinian's the plague, basically brought by fleas that basically infected rats, which infected port cities all throughout Justinian's empire, which spread everywhere, taking the bubonic plague to new levels. Outbreaks of the plague have been quite common since Antoninus Pius and the Antonine Plague of the 160s, but this outbreak of plague had been the worst in centuries, and it became a worldwide pandemic. It almost killed Justinian himself. It devastated his army and his supplies, focusing on dealing with the public health crisis, kept him from administering his provinces that he had conquered in Italy and other places, and the Byzantine Empire was eventually forced to release a lot of this and not continue its conquest of Western territories like Spain and Gaul, basically meaning that the Western Roman Empire would never be fully reconquered by the East, and the Byzantines weren't ever able to get back there, although they did control North Africa and Italy for quite some time. Former Western Roman territories. Is it fair to say that the Protestants won the 30-Year War? Basically, by creating the nation-state and ending the religious wars in Europe, Protestants proved that they were there to stay. They were there to stay, and that's the 30 Years' War between 1618 and 1648, where basically Europe exploded in a series of devastating phases of different wars wherein the Danish, the Swedish, and later the French would fight against the Habsburgs to try to check Habsburg power but also give Protestants more religious rights. I heard that the Iranians are protesting to restore the Shah. What is the legitimacy of that in the history of how the Shah or Iran became a monarchy? Was that a long institution and will it return? Having a Shah in Persia and then later Iran is just part of its history. The Shah is the oldest form of government. It is the term for ruler, emperor, or king that the Persians used all the way back with Alexander the Great when he defeated King Darius at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC, which is the basis for this mosaic, which is my background. So you're joining me and Alexander the Great to talk about history. The term Shah was used for the government and king and monarchy that was established in the 20th century in Iran after the British ended their mandate or semi-control of it following the Great War. Basically, that land had been controlled by the Ottomans, and then it was eventually taken over by the British, who managed it and basically said who got to be in charge. The Shah of Iran, who was close with the British government and basically allowed the British to do what they want, particularly British petroleum, was considered the legitimate government. The efforts, however, of Mohammad Mossadegh in the 1950s to nationalize the oil fields and get Britain out of their investments in Iran triggered a coup in which Mossadegh was removed from power and eventually killed, and the Shah became much more of a dictatorial figure, basically using authoritarian power to continue to control the Iranians until the Islamic Revolution of 1979 overthrew the Shah. His son, I believe it's the son of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who fled in 1979, is waiting in the wings to take over should the revolution work. Then again, remember, there was a protest and revolution 16 years ago, and the latest reports I'm hearing are that 700 people have been killed in the streets of Tehran. Now, is that true? I don't know. When I say rich, I don't mean a millionaire. I make $300,000 a year, and I came from poverty. I worked my tail off. Well, good for you. I applaud your efforts. I think you've done very well for yourself, so congratulations there. If communism is the definition of equality, isn't implemented when it comes to social issues such as voting rights, equality of marriage, eliminating housing discrimination? Hyperbolic question. Communism is an economic system that was originally intended only to be economic, that has eventually found social and cultural explanations and applications as well. It is not equality on every single front, and it can advocate for those types of equality, but it is not strictly a form of equality that applies to every social aspect. It isn't even equality when it comes to economic. It's the ownership of everything. It is the abolishment of private property. It is the redistribution. It is the mass redistribution of wealth and the ownership of a means of production by the workers. What are the best 5 books to start learning about history? You want to probably read a generic general survey book like Norton's History of the World, which I think Penguin puts out, and that's kind of the seminal work, and that's like 1,200 pages, but it's good enough to give a general survey of all information. You want to read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Schreier to understand World War III and Germany and of course that historical epic. You want to read The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. These are pretty generic things. A.G.P. Taylor's Fall of the Causes of World War II, which is really World War III. That's another good one. There are definitely a lot of different historical books you can pick from. It depends on what context you want to learn about. If you want to learn about presidential history, David McCullough or John Meacham will have biographies of presidents that are really compelling and easy to follow. So it all depends on how academic or how much of pop history you want to get into. But those are some ones to be sure. Shout out from Hamburg. Great to see you. X was his name as always. Iranians represent a small sector of that region, which is largely Persian, and these concepts predate Islam. True. The Persians were long before Islam. In fact, the monotheism was present in Persia long before the invention of Islam, in the religion of Zoroastrianism. Let me see. Someone told me I have a face only a Habsburg could love. Oh, that's nasty. The Habsburg chin and all of that. The inbreeding was pretty crazy. Why are we deleting everything that Immortality is saying? Or is it Immetro? I can't pronounce your name. But why are we deleting everything he was saying? Why are we timing him out? He wasn't saying anything wrong. What was the relationship between African Americans and the Nazis in the Holocaust? The Nazis hated anyone who was not, or believed that blacks were inferior. They didn't target them for elimination, as far as I know. Let me see here. Hello, good to see you, Cherish. Based, great to see you. Anyways, questions about history or social studies? You shouldn't have gotten muted. I don't know why you did. How about you tell me? Well, ask questions, Harry, and I'll answer questions about history. Do you think you're Alexander? No. but I love learning about him. I have an entire video on Alexander the Great. Hars, can you put the social medias in the chat as well as my video on Alexander the Great? If you want to learn more about the history of maybe the greatest general ever, you can here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where we take history seriously, but we also enjoy ourselves and talk about it in a friendly, neighborly manner, 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year, with our live streams Fridays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, answering all of your questions, and our live stream lecture, which you can vote on exclusively here on YouTube at 4 p.m. on Sundays. And we also have short videos out every day, as well as long-form videos on Mondays and Fridays. I talk about modern geopolitics, usually in a historical context. If you want deeper analysis, I usually ask for a super chat, but sure, I'll answer a question if you're base Bob, if you want to ask. And good to see you, Darshan. Thank you for joining us. Do you think spoils of war from the past should be returned to the country of origin? No, because that would be an endless loop of reparations that's just not possible. If you don't do reparations within one generation of the event happening, it's almost impossible to trace it. And reparations would be an ongoing, endless cycle and infinite regress of lunacy if we tried to do it, because everybody owes someone something else for invasions and conquests. And as soon as the British are pay back the different Africans that they had subjected, they are expected a payment back from the French, who conquered them in 1066 under the Normans. So, there you go. Communism has a rich ruling class that decides who and who does not get benefits. And many people would say capitalism has the same. There's the Pareto principle that no matter what, you're always going to have an upper class. And I think communism, with the apparatchiks and the corruption and Mao and Stalin's communist governments, you can see that to be true. Our universe is energy. The law of conservation is that a God started the history of our universe. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. So matter is eternal? I don't know if that's scientifically provable either. What was the first civilization? There's several candidates for the first civilization: the Shang in China, or the Shan Valley people. There's also the Mesopotamians, the earliest Mesopotamians in Sumer. There are the Mohenjo-Daro, Indus River Valley people, and of course there's the Egyptians. They're all kind of similar. And yes, you can follow us on Patreon, TikTok, and Substack for other information you won't get here. And there's plenty of stuff here that you won't get there, so follow us both places. Why reparations for Japanese internees but not for African Americans? Great question. Japanese internees, I guess you could call them, people who were placed in internment camps by the American government during the last World War because they were of Japanese ancestry, were given to the victims themselves when they had grown up. It was given to people who had actually gone through the experience. Reparations were actually planned for slaves, 40 acres and a mule, during Reconstruction, but never really came to fruition because of the political infighting and destabilization of Ulysses S. Grant's presidency due to a lot of corruption that ruined if Grant hadn't suffered with all of the different issues dealing with corruption in his administration, reparations, as well as full political equal rights for African Americans and a refurbished South probably would have happened, and probably better racial harmony would have been achieved in the United States. Not perfection, but it would have been a lot better. But basically, it's a lot harder to give reparations to the descendants of certain peoples than it is to give it to the people directly. So there's a little bit there why there's reparations for Japanese Americans who were interned during World War III or World War II, whatever you want to call it, but not for African Americans. If you enjoy the history I'm talking about, communism theory promised universal freedom and equality, sir. How is liberal politics such as voting rights, gay marriage, and segregation not an aspect of it? It can be, but it's not the primary focus. They are looking for economic equality, and the way they think that happens is by the abolishment of property, but of money, the seizing of the means of production by any means necessary, even through violent revolution, which leads to the deaths of a lot of people. That's not very fair either. Generally speaking, communist governments tend to declare complete equality between the sexes, but of course this is a completely theoretical thing and almost never works out in practicum. The Soviet Union declared equal rights for women, as well as legalizing abortion and contraception when they took power in the 1920s. Scipio Africanus, do you believe he was a better general than Hannibal? Nobody beat him game by taking the Roman forces and invading Hannibal and the Carthaginian forces in Italy, who had been to Africa and fight and lose at the Battle of Zama. It's okay to say we don't know. If I don't know, I'm going to say I don't know. What year was Sumerian civilization starting? Anywhere between some of the earliest clay tablets of cuneiform that we have from that era are around 3500 BC to 4000 BC. You have cities like Ur and Uruk that are some of the earliest city-states in human history. Those are examples. because of the Dixiecrats? Yes, I guess. Communism is horrible and has never worked anywhere. Half his land is mountains, right? Yes, but there's a lot. And yes, please join our Discord. You can enjoy conversations about history 24/7 with me and other leaders of the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, including members like Gaiahan, who has the emoji because he's a member. You can become a member here for a small fee, get an emoji, early access, and bonus content. Or like my moderators, like Harry and Hars, who enjoy some really, really good, robust debates there. They do a great job running this channel, and we should give them a shout out. What's the truth? What truth of history is actually wrong? Napoleon was short. That's British political propaganda used by cartoons to try to make Napoleon look more insignificant than he actually was. Napoleon was actually pretty standard height, especially for that time period. Should we have went further with Reconstruction, but we had a Confederate sympathizer in office after Lincoln? Andrew Johnson was a Confederate sympathizer who basically said as long as the slaves went free, he didn't care what happened to them afterwards. But Ulysses to destroy the Ku Klux Klan and get the Fifth Amendment through, but he was unable to keep the Freedmen's Bureau and the Republican majority in Congress going because of his own political corruption, which was used as the brandishing iron against him by Northern Democrats who were able to sweep back in power in Congress, which kept Grant from with the issues of Reconstruction. So by the time Grant leaves office, the Republicans really can't, the radical Republicans way and are not able to fix the issues. Also, the patronage system has corrupted the political fiber of both Congress and the executive branch by the mid-1870s, and so it's a lot harder for the Republicans to get anything done when it comes to reforming the South like they had in the 1860s after the war. Did John Adams face scrutiny for his work as a legal defense for British soldiers? Yes, this is after the Boston Massacre. John Adams defended those soldiers, basically believing that a right was more, and making sure everybody got due process was more important than the fact that they were the British who he hated. Yes, he faced a lot of scrutiny for that, but he proved the principle of due process was more your own biases and personal feelings. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee, but I hope you're all really enjoying it. And again, if you are, please subscribe. An unofficial Friendly Neighborhood Historian is as easy as that, and becoming an official one is just for a small fee every month. Ourselves, on this channel helps, and we use the money to get excellent equipment and tech like our lighting and this amazing microphone with a 40s theme that I really, really love. So hopefully everybody's having a really good Saturday as I take a sip of coffee from my, as I suspected I was right all along, mug. What's happening in Iran? Violent protests are being violently squashed. What a surprise. These are the same people who condemned the U.S. aggression in Venezuela, by the way. Can I get reparations from the English crown for making me and my ancestors cannon fodder? Are you Irish? You sound Irish. That's a very Irish question. I think it's just ethical and historically insane to demand reparations. I think if you're going to demand reparations historically, it's going to be an infinite, like I said earlier, it's going to be an infinite regress that goes nowhere, and one person's going to owe another, and as soon as you get your reparations, you have to give it to somebody else. It would have been interesting to see Carthage become the powerful dominant force or a co-dominant power with the Romans in the Mediterranean. The creation of the Western world to supremacy of the Roman or Republican Empire, so that has to involve the destruction of the Carthaginians in the Punic Wars. We're Ulster Scots. Oh, I see. Yes, that sounds about right also. I think America always has a win-win formula for everything. I might bankrupt the Treasury, maybe. I don't know how any country can successfully do reparations. Sherman stopped too soon. Sherman devastated the South and was heavily criticized for what many people believe to be an inhumane war. Power in Iran prevented the Shah from implementing a complete repressive system, sir. The overthrow of the Shah had more to do with middle-class grievances. That's not true. Grievances. There were plenty of liberal Democrats who wanted open democracy. There were plenty of communist agitators who were working with the Soviets, and there were plenty of radical Muslims who wanted to press with Sharia law. Guess who won out and ended up screwing out everyone else, just like the Bolsheviks did with the Russian Revolution? It was the radical Muslims. Let me see. Yes, and carrots aren't great for eyesight, but vitamin A and carotene are good for you, and carrots contain a lot of good sugars, so eat carrots, yes. Do you have any ancient artifacts? No, this microphone's not that ancient. I do not have ancient artifacts. I need some. I need to decorate the studio, and that's something that we could do with the right amount of support. Let me see. Göbekli Tepe is 2 times older than the Sumerians, so your answer was wrong, sir. I don't know if that Göbekli Tepe. I don't know enough about it. Why was England part by Empire, but not Scotland. The Romans could never conquer Scotland because the Scottish would just retreat to the Highlands and then attack the Romans whenever they wanted. Antoninus Pius tries to build a wall much more north of Hadrian's Wall, and that ends up not working. Hadrian's Wall becomes the demarcation between Caledonia and the Roman colony of Britannia for centuries. What is the future? What is the future of Iran? Will it be Persia again? I don't know. Maybe. I don't see the revolution going anywhere. Is this a good thing for countries like India? I don't know. I just don't know. Thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate it. Scotland was considered at the ends of the earth, and even the Britons were afraid of the primal Scots at the time. It just wasn't the Romans' time. Yes, they were different Celtic groups, just like the Gauls were Celts. The Celtic were the most predominant group of barbarians in Northern Europe, France, England, Scotland, and Ireland. The Romans also thought about conquering Hibernia, the island of Ireland, but never got of it. Let me see here. Mel Gibson defended Scotland. Sounds about right. Something he would do. Will this open its borders for more Eastern European migrants, green cards legally, of course? Maybe of immigrants, we'll see. People who say that we've never seen that America is a nation of immigrants and has always been welcoming to immigrants have not paid attention. When America was bringing in a large number of immigrants, many of them were discriminated against extremely heavily and suffered mightily. Some of them even remigrated because it was so hard. Also, there were many times in American history, like between 1925 and 1965, where immigration quotas were used and very few people from certain areas of the world were allowed to come in. In fact, in many times in the U.S. history, there was a preference given to certain people of certain areas of the world, usually white Western countries, which had similar backgrounds to the United States itself. Now, will that come again? We'll see. Is it extraordinarily retrograde and probably pretty racist? Yes, but it is not impossible for the United States to consider rationing immigrants. The fact that the United States has always been made of immigrants, there has always been immigration, is true, but the United States has mitigated this heavily, almost to the point of getting rid of 90 to 95% of it many, many different times. The United States is probably, if you look at it from a historically accurate lens, founded by settlers who settled land fully nationalized as a country. This land is taken and stolen from Indians and fought over and conquered. And these settlers form a system that becomes a country that then is populated heavily by immigrants. And that country, of course, is the United States. So that's probably the better way to say, to settle is America a country of immigrants or settlers? It's both. Let me see. The Irish and Spanish were the most powerful. The Spanish were really powerful, and Caledonia is a really cool name. I love that name. Great name for a dog. Imagine if we found a UFO or something, that'd be cool. You guys can't even find the Loch Ness Monster. No offense, I love the Scottish. I love Scotland. I'd love to live in Scotland. Scotland is so beautiful, but great question, Alexander. Abraham Lincoln, not an army on earth could take a sip from the Ohio River. That's true. It was horrible in the early 1970s to deal with it. Why is there no pregnant Barbie doll? Because oh my goodness. Wow, MM Lane. You almost had me read that whole thing. Is Napoleon an example of born in a wrong generation? He was obviously very successful, but faced exile towards the end. Would he have been more successful in an earlier generation? He's a liminal figure. He bridges the gap between the 19th century and the international imperialism of the Europeans, and the 18th and 17th century and the continental imperialism of the European nations, where they were very focused on conquering large amounts of land and duchies and basically using smaller duchies and areas to be under their management and under their influence, while also conquering land and creating puppet states. The Nation of the Rhine is a great example of this, what Napoleon creates in Germany after he gets rid of the Holy Roman Empire. So Napoleon brings forward several of the ideas of the French Revolution to certain areas of Europe, which helped spreads nationalism and liberalism in the 19th century, which leads to all sorts of revolutions and upheaval, including in France itself. But at the same time, he is also very much a monarchist. He's an imperialist. He's loyal to the church in some ways, and he is traditional, and he is fighting with newer the 18th century drill-style tactics that the British would have used in the American Revolution, for instance, the lobster backs or redcoats, if you want to call them that. So Napoleon has a lot of retrograde ideas, but he's also got a lot of progressive ideas. So he's kind of bridging the gap between a Europe that will seek to colonize the world all over the place, but not in Europe itself, and an older European system of trying to take over as much land in Europe itself. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I appreciate all of you joining me. We still have another half hour to go, but I need to charge my phone, so I'm going to be moving real fast. So just give me a quick minute, and we will be back. Please like and subscribe while I am doing that. All right, we are back. Let's see here. I had to unplug my microphone, so I won't be using that for a few minutes. Let me see. I always do my stream until I get down to 1%, which happens all the time. But we are here. I am all right. And yes, I do love the microphone. Oh, wow. So yeah, questions about history or social studies. Hopefully you enjoyed that answer. I think about Napoleon. Excuse me. Will it become Persia? No, Iran probably will not become Persia. I don't see this revolution really going anywhere, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. Had a stream where the phone straight up dies. I've had streams where the phone straight up dies. It does die from time to time. Do you think that firing Bismarck was a mistake? Yes, Bismarck was able to avoid several wars, and Kaiser Wilhelm II wasn't interested in avoiding wars. He was interested in causing them. So I think that he really changes the dynamics and makes, and basically would have stopped the aggressiveness of Kaiser Wilhelm II, but I don't think that they were going to go for that. I don't think that that was something that Kaiser Wilhelm wanted, so it was just a total generational difference between Bismarck and Wilhelm II, whereas Wilhelm I was more than willing to let him do whatever he wanted. Take the time to think before you speak. No. Bro, any idea why Romans didn't come by near East Asia to fight or do business with the Ethiopians? They did do business. They traded along the Silk Road. They had many associations with they knew about the Ethiopians. They were aware of the Ethiopians and had some business with them, and they used the Silk Road. They believe that the peoples of the Bactri Empire and Afghanistan, and I believe it's the Mauryans in India, they knew about these empires. They just believed that they were inferior. So, let me see here. You mean liberalism? You mean Jewish subversion? No, liberalism is not Jewish. Liberalism of Napoleon. I'm not referring to like left-wing democratic politics in the United States necessarily. I'm referring to classical liberal speech, democracy, the ability to vote for your leaders, stuff like that. That was very, very common in Europe in the 19th century, and was started before with ideas like Locke and Voltaire and some of these Enlightenment philosophers. These political philosophers influenced the American Revolution, also influenced the French Revolution, and was disseminated by Napoleon during his time, spreading ideas, culture, and French militarism throughout the continent during the first 2 decades of the 19th century. Let me see here. Next. Russian Spanish are the most powerful. The Irish are very powerful, but they are not the same. Yes, I love the combination of the microphone and the smoking jacket. I will keep it up. Thank you. And keep hoping for the reparations. They're not going to happen. It's not economically feasible if you look at it from a political perspective. Did the British always dominate naval power? Did the French or Spanish ever overtake them? The Spanish were pretty powerful. The British really don't get there until the 18th century, late 17th, early 18th century. The British, the Dutch needed it. The Spanish needed it for colonization. The Dutch needed it because they were a small republic, and England needed it because it was an island. But there was a need for your navy to be the most powerful, and the British eventually developed the best ships and developed the largest number of them, and this is one of the reasons Napoleon never was able to win like he wanted to, because he wasn't able to subdue them. And in my book, as much as I love Alexander the Great, and that's my background of Alexander the Great, is his great victory, I use great a lot, against the Persians and Darius at Gaugamela, I would take Napoleon over Alexander the Great. I think he's the better general. I think he's the better tactician, and I think Alexander never did anything with his lead, and I think that they're similar in many ways, but I think Napoleon was a more effective military leader. And Hars, if you're here, could you put the video, my wonderful moderator Hars, could you put the video to Alexander the Great and Napoleon in the chat, and everyone can listen to my thoughts and more descriptive details about both of these great rulers and generals. But it wasn't always the British. The British surprised the world by defeating the Spanish Armada in 1588, and the Dutch were the pretty dominant ones in the 1600s. Do you think that Germany could have won World War II if they weren't fighting on two fronts? They could have won both world wars if they weren't fighting on two fronts. In fact, all 3 world wars that Germany fought, Germany only won the first one, the 7 Years' War in 1756 to 1763, but they also, of course, won they lost the other probably because of the two-front war. Montesquieu is another great philosopher from that era of the Enlightenment. Think before you read out loud. Yes, Harry, okay. Should the Afghan flag be considered changed to the Taliban one for consistency here? I don't think it will be. They just want to take over. They want people to think this is the legitimate government of Afghanistan, so that's why they won't change it. It's about the oil, man. A lot of the time, it is about the oil. Even when it's not about the oil, it's about the oil. Look at how I was talking about Mohammed Mossadegh being overthrown. It's not just the Americans who do this. Other countries have done this throughout all of history. The Soviets went into Afghanistan probably for similar reasons. You didn't even have a port. I don't know what you mean. The Spanish Armada was destroyed during Liz, I guess, hence English sea power. It's the beginning of English sea power, but the English Navy had already been created by her father, Henry VIII, and wouldn't see its real dominance come to fruition until the later part of the 17th century, following several wars with the Dutch. Did you do a piece on the War of 1812 yet? I've done several videos on the War of 1812. It's a controversial topic here because people in America go crazy when you say the Americans didn't win the War of 1812. I'm an American. I love America. I love American history, but I can't concede to that because I know enough about history to know the Americans didn't win that war. So, no. But what's a more potent question? Can history ever escape the present, or can the present ever escape history? The present is trying to escape history. Ignorant people wanted to escape history, but hopefully the present never does escape history because history always comes back. History is undefeated. History is always teaching. History is always giving. What are we giving to history? I guess our decisions and actions. But at the end of the day, history is the one that is giving us something. It is giving us lessons. It is giving us an art at the world. And we need to look at it fairly and honestly. To be honest, the Chinese and Russians were in Venezuela for the oil, but yeah, America is the big bad evil for doing the same thing. Well, the United States probably, if I don't like to discuss geopolitics usually without a super chat, but the United States is probably trying to curtail China's efforts to take Taiwan. The Chinese delegation was in Venezuela when Maduro was taken. That was not unintentional. That was not accidental. That was not a coincidence. That was, we can do this. Be on the lookout. And it was also, it's a very strong message of U.S. imperialism and control over Central and South America, something that they have been wrestling with, how much control they exert over Latin America since the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. And please go watch my video on the Monroe Doctrine and my multiple U.S. presidential videos on James Monroe. I have an entire short series of U.S. presidents, British monarchs, and Russian czars I think you could all go check out, including long-form videos where I tier rank all of them. So please check those out when you can. Leave a like and a comment to help the algorithm and all that. Why throughout history economic collapses happen in the U.S. despite majority of constituents remain somewhat stagnant and are the catalyst of the economy due to being employed for 30 to 35 years? Economic collapses happen because of market speculation, market weaknesses, overloaning, like monetary policies, also part of a cause for the Great Depression, economic panics, worries about bimetallism and the use of silver or gold as an economic standard caused the depression of the 1890s. Worldwide economic factors cause depressions. So they're not because of people having consistent employment. I believe they can't get the oil because of the infrastructure. Maybe they were trying to get the money by selling drugs to get the oil. I don't know. I don't know about that. If you're new to the channel, know that Woodrow Wilson was great and that America won the War of 1812. Yes, that's what we talk about all the time. You've always been smart. Yes, I always have been. Very smart. I do the same thing in the grand scram of it all. Yep. Do you think we'll rename Greenland to Orangeland? That would be funny. By the way, for everybody complaining about, and this is not a defense of President Trump, but for everybody who's complaining about Trump doing all of these aggressive things, attacking Venezuela, wanting to buy Greenland, and saying this is unheard of. It's unheard of in modern politics and geopolitics, which is really monitored by the U.S. in the post-war consensus that's created after 1945. Today is the first anniversary of the first meeting of the United Nations 80 years ago. I did a video because of this stuff. But the truth of the matter is, the United States has always been acquisitive. The United States has always been an expansionist power, either by land or by influence, and it's done it multiple different times. Do you think the moon landing was just for scientific purposes? The moon landing was totally imperialistic. It's a total shove-off to the Soviet Union in the midst of the Cold War. The U.S. built its highway system, which is famous, because of its need for military preparation in case the Soviet Union invaded them in the Cold War. The U.S. has done many acquisitive things. That's how California is part of the United States. That's how Texas is part of the United States, and Florida. Andrew Jackson was literally the first Florida man. He ran into Florida, didn't like the governor, overthrew him, and took over. So he was like the first literal Florida man. Owen Johnson, good to see you. Is it bad to joke about Charlie Kirk? I mean, it's pretty bad. I mean, people do it all the time because we're an insensitive group of jackasses in this country sometimes. Name off all relevant superpowers. Right now, the Americans, the British, the Chinese, the Russians. The moon landings were so cool. America put its aerospace industry into overdrive. Yes, and they're also so cool if you're Candaceans and don't believe in anything like science or any of that crazy stuff, so that you can develop wacko conspiracy theories about it because you've developed pure lunacy. And yes, by the way, if you're new to the channel and you're wondering where I am politically, you're not going to find out. Same thing with my religious beliefs. You can keep guessing at it. I have people who are calling me a right-winger and a left-winger all the time because I make certain statements and they don't like it, they flip out. But even my moderators, who have been with the channel a long time, have no idea where I stand on a bevy of issues. What do you think of the We Are Charlie Kirk song? It's unfortunately very catchy. The moon landings, so cool. Yes, we agree. What about India? India's getting up there. Yeah, India probably would be in there too. No French, they're a nuclear power with aircraft carrier. They're France. I feel comfortable saying France is not a superpower. They're a global power. I don't know if they're on the same tier. You can even set aside American badassery and respect the Apollo program for pure human ingenuity and zeal for curiosity. Very true. Christian Republican voter if you know history. I do know history. There are plenty of people who know history who are not Christians or Republicans. In fact, the vast majority of historians who are trained in the science are neither. Where are you from? I'm from the U.S. I'm not going to say more. Yes, India is expanding into Africa as well, even if it's only minor. That's true. India has a global economy and a lot of tech savvy. That's very true. You can't talk about the global economy without talking about India. So, fair point. Top empires in world and history. The Romans, the Greeks, the British, the Mongolians, the Americans, and the French. Those are some of the big empires you should know about. You should also know about the Mali Empire, one of the richest in all of human history in West Africa. This is Mansa Musa and Timbuktu. You should also know about the Mughal Empire in India, as well as the Russians. And if you want to, and I'm a Russian historian by trade, so that's what I talk about probably the most. No way you vote for socialism if you know history. Most academics are left-wing, especially historical and social science academics. Sorry, didn't mean to burst your bubble. Americans, you mean USA? No, I mean Americans who live in the United States of America. Was the USS Maine sabotaged by the Spanish to start the Spanish-American War, or was there Americans just looking for a fight? They're both. It's very possible that both are true. At the very least, there were Americans looking for a fight and manipulating the story. The yellow press, the yellow journalism of people like William Randolph Hearst and, of course, Joseph Pulitzer, who had an award named after him for basically manipulating information and selling sob stories so that the American public would demand war with Spain, leads to the splendid little war, the War of 1898, or the Spanish-American War, where the Americans are able to take over Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines, as well as Puerto Rico. Let me see here. If I were blessing the We Are Charlie Kirk song, if I were blasting the We Are Charlie Kirk song, do you think supporters of Charlie Kirk would be mad or happy about it? I don't know why you spend so much time thinking about this. I don't know what the people at TPUSA think. I don't really care. And yes, I know a lot about history. Charlie Kirk ran the Black Youth Leadership Conference every year. Why are you screaming your answers with all caps? He brought young Black Americans to CEOs, businesses, getting them jobs, and introduced them to the president. That's nice. I'm not a political channel. I feel horrible about what happened with Charlie Kirk. Go watch my live stream about right after Kirk died. I think it's absolutely abominable that people are being killed just for their political beliefs. But yeah, that has nothing to do with what I am doing here. Is Japan dead as an empire? It's an empire in name only. Don't say Professor L.A. know history. I'm saying anyone who knows history. Didn't say Professor L.A. know history. I don't know what you mean. Do you believe in extraterrestrial life and you think they have visited Earth? The first is very possible. The second is less possible, but there's legends in almost every civilization. The Chinese, the Assyrians, the Native Americans all believed in space travelers, giants, and things like this. The Bible even talks about it. Or will Japan make a comeback? It might make a comeback if the United States bolsters it up for a war with China. It might be a pawn that supersedes its position during an American scuffle with the Chinese, a Cold War or a hot war. I bet most of his supporters have no clue what you're talking about. Probably. Are you concerned with the possible breakdown of NATO? How would you see any realignment playing out? Germany, UK heading a federal or collective European security bloc in absence or indifferent US? Yeah, you'd probably get the European Union basically becoming an international organization and trying to rack up more support from other countries like Canada and Mexico. You could also see more aggression to getting the Eastern European states involved. But NATO was founded by the U.S. As a bulwark against communism and the Soviet Union. It is an anti-Russian organization, so I understand why the Russians have a lot of worries about it. The Russians are always worried about invaders, and of course Putin will use any excuse he can to gain more power and glory, but he is really a paper tiger. He should have won that war with the Ukrainians, and he hasn't, which is a proof that his government and military are actually quite weak, and his position is weak, and he's doing what he can to stay in power. Now, if Zelensky and Bibi Netanyahu are doing the same thing, that's a little bit more of a complex debate. But that's at least my opinion based off of being a Russian historian and looking at the geopolitical situation and understanding Russian history, which very few people who talk about the geopolitical situation in Russia and Ukraine are concerned with. I think that President Trump is more of an opportunist than he is an isolationist, and he wants NATO to basically do what he wants. And what he's doing is interesting because on one hand, it seems very aggressive and bullish, and in a way it is, and it's pretty inappropriate for many people. But at the same time, he's kind of just saying out loud what a lot of people have implicitly understood. NATO and the UN, for that matter, are very much the international lapdog of the US and have been for quite some time, especially NATO. Is CNN fake news? It can be. I don't like the way the news reports things. They're not objective. I do daily news updates, at least I try to, about news, and I report it very objectively. And I think things need to be covered fairly. And I don't think CNN or Fox News has that in their agenda. I think they have an agenda of corporate sponsorship, of doing what they think is right, and of basically feeding the political side that they think will give them the most amount of support. So that's what happens with Fox, and that's what happens with CNN. The Spanish and Portuguese, by the way, the question Pacific Waves asked, which is a great question about NATO, supranationalism is a new idea in history. It is a relatively new idea to just form large intercontinental systems and organizations that kind of work on the same wavelength and do the same thing. It might be an idea that goes the way of the dodo bird in history a lot sooner than we think because of personal self-aggrandizement interest like President Trump certainly has for the United States. The Spanish and Portuguese empires are good contenders, but America is so widely successful and unified that it kind of bumps them off the list. Oh yeah, Spain should probably be added. I would add Spain, not Portugal. Academics are left-wing because they believe in the distorted view of history, or do you think it's distorted because it's left-wing? That doesn't mean that it's untrue, by the way. Doesn't the working class stagnation prevent economic collapse for a long duration of time due to the fact that the workers are the catalyst of the birth of businesses and consumer power? Why recessions? Recessions happen because businesses fail. Businesses fail, people can't afford to do what they used to do, that undermines other businesses. It's a chain reaction that leads to the collapse of the economy. There's obviously a clash coming between the US and China. Any idea when? I don't know if it's going to be a cold or a hot war, but it's going to be sometime this century. What's your take on an American Civil War? We've had one, we'll see if we have another. Ukraine is literally a Russian state. Ukraine was a Russian state, but in many ways, the Kievan Rus, the first state in that region, was started in Ukraine and then branched out to become Russian. But Ukraine was part, of course, of the Soviet Union, and for a long time was part of the Russian Empire. But does that mean that their independence of the last 30 years should be violated or not? It's an interesting question. Worst case scenario, I would say, I would lean towards no. Worst case scenario where NATO, EU grow increasingly pitted against the United States, I think the United States would pivot to seriously strangle and control Canada and Mexico. I don't think this will happen, though. It could. The United States could also try its hand at taking Greenland. I don't know if that would dissolve NATO. I don't know that Denmark is really going to have the power to dissolve NATO just over the Greenland scandal. But we'll see. The United States probably doesn't know what it's in for in facing up against its other geopolitical rivals by alienating its erstwhile allies like France and Great Britain. Is there still a Warsaw Pact nations against NATO? No, that was taken apart at the end of the Cold War. All those countries gained their independence from the Soviet Union. Hello, E-Dog, good to see you. Yeah, CBS is also pretty biased. I don't trust the news, basically. Tanya, great to see you. I'll go watch a video about the War of 1812, but could you just give a quick summary about what you think why you think America lost? Thank you. Okay, so the War of 1812 is fought. It's the first major war America fights, and basically the U.S. loses. Their capital is destroyed by the British. The British win several naval engagements. The Americans have a failed invasion of Canada. The British take over Detroit, as well as several territories in the Midwest. And the Americans really struggle to deal with the British Army and Navy. The Navy, by the way, the British are also able to fight Napoleon at the same time. The war is fought because the British were stealing American ships and taking sailors and cargo in their fights against Napoleon. Napoleon is defeated near the end of this war, so the British no longer feel the need to do that. And basically, the Americans get some consolation prizes, like Fort McHenry being defended, leading to the writing of a Star-Spangled Banner, and Andrew Jackson's huge victory at New Orleans, which happens after the war is officially over, but nobody knew because you didn't have instant messaging, emails, and social media like you do now, or phones for that matter, or telegraph even. So at that point, the United States is kind of staying on its own 2 feet, and Britain decides to kind of leave it alone. And the U.S. grows and becomes exponentially powerful during the 19th century, and the British don't punish them or try to recolonize them because they never really had that intention to begin with. Their intention was to punish the Americans for trying to challenge them, which they basically did. And basically, it's kind of a big brother beating up a little brother kind of thing. In my opinion. And I think the United States gets beaten up. I think their capital is burned. The president has to flee. James Madison never lives in the White House again during his presidency. Dolly Madison has to take the portrait down of George Washington to avoid it being destroyed. You have the Americans losing several important sea battles, as well as battles with the British at the Chesapeake Bay, for instance. I think the British are pretty handily the victors in that war. If Ukraine surrendered to Russia, do you think Ukrainians would retreat and end up hobos, or would they be able to have a good life still? I don't know. If they surrender, they're probably going to be giving up land in the east, and we'll see how historically close Putin is to Hitler. I don't think Putin is comparable to Hitler. He's much older. He's much weaker. He's serving over a country that has a lot of resources and manpower, but doesn't have the military prowess of the German Wehrmacht. So I don't see that appeasement of giving Putin land is going to automatically mean that Putin will go in and try to take all of Ukraine. He might not. It all depends on international geopolitical relations. Hitler basically felt he would never get punished. Would Putin feel that he would get punished if he gets the Donbass region, which is really what he wants, the oil in the Donbass region, and a corridor to get to Crimea, which he has already annexed? Do you think it's possible for a historical perspective that Donald Trump can acquire Greenland? Yes, the Americans are very acquisitive. I never said that's a good thing. I said it's a thing. After the Americans beat the Spanish and occupied the Philippines, what would the results have been if annexed as a U.S. state? The Filipinos fought back. Emilio Aguinaldo and the Filipino Revolution. William Howard Taft, the future president, put down that revolution, and with John Blackjack Pershing, the famous American general from the Great War. But basically, the United States never wanted to develop the Philippines so that they could become an independent nation, but they believed the Filipinos were inferior socially, civilizationally, and racially, which was a common theory amongst Westerners at the time, that the colonies they had would eventually probably get independence, but needed to be controlled. The Philippines was kind of like the mandate system, but for the U.S., whereas Britain and France had mandates in the Middle East following the Great War. The U.S. had the Philippines. They wanted the Filipinos to be able to govern themselves, and and after the last World War, they kind of just gave up on the idea and decolonized under pressure from the Soviet Union at the start of a Cold War. In 1700, before Austria, it would have been very interesting had the Philippines become a U.S. state. It's too far away from the United States, I think, to be a state, too close to the East Asia. That would have been a much different, there would have been a much different morale and attitude about it had the United States lost the Philippines to the Japanese in the war, and that had been a U.S. state. Or imagine the Philippines becoming a U.S. state in the 1960s or 50s, like Hawaii does, and that being a base of operations for the U.S. invasion of China or of course, Vietnam. You would have seen things being very different. It's quite an interesting hypothetical. In 1700, before Austria took control of Sicily, why were they afraid to give it to France? Is it because they were African that the frogs would get too powerful? They were afraid. This is part of the War of the Spanish Succession, the War of the Austrian Succession. Basically, the Austrians believed these wars happened, these ticky-tack wars in the late 17th and early 18th century in Europe. Louis XIV of France leads a lot of them, and basically it's to control small provinces and areas. This is how England gets Gibraltar, by the way, from the Spanish. Why were they afraid to give it to France? They didn't want, it's probably to prevent Louis XIV from getting too powerful, which he already wanted. He wanted as much land and power as he could get. Conservative Catholics are the original academics creating universities, hospitals. That's true. It's not untrue that that's true, but Monique, it's also true that academia today is dominated by left-wing people who tend to be more skeptical about religion, and that's definitely true of history. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it's a thing. If you had to be one historical figure, who would you be? Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Jesus of Nazareth, Gandhi. These are all great candidates. The French almost got Sicily, but the frogs lost it to Austria. Yep. I beg everyone that's asked about Charlie is a card-carrying Brit. I bet everyone that asked. Okay. Businesses fail due to the one reason: innovation, i.e. creative destruction, which birth new businesses that attract employees and the skills needed to do the job. Working class stagnation, recession proof. Somewhat. Stagnation economically does not mean recession. Recession is a genuine, measurable loss in the economy. Ronald Reagan broke down idiosyncratic perspective in what determined a recession. Very subjective. Okay, then. What do you think on the theory that Alexander the Great was buried alive because he passed out? Probably not. I think he dies, and we don't know how he dies, and I think his generals use that as an opportunity to go to war with each other, and Seleucus eventually gets most of the land. Then the Ptolemies take over Egypt. What would need to happen in order for oil to cease to be a factor sparking war and authoritarianism? Renewable energy being constantly available, perhaps a full switch over to nuclear power, but even then, oil would still be a high-price commodity. Basically, renewable energy going off the charts. How Switzerland became a neutral country. Switzerland has always kind of been in that position. What allowed Switzerland to be more insular is the Alps that defend it. And you have the German, Italian, and Swiss Alps, and they all kind of keep Switzerland away from dealing with France, Germany, or Italy during the 19th and 20th centuries. Thank you for coming. I'm glad the algorithm brought you to us, Trista. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone else for joining us. If you like talking about history and social studies, you're in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing. We've got about 5 more minutes in the live stream, so please ask your question. I promise I'll try to get to answer it. But it's great to have everybody here. I've been charging my phone, so I haven't been able to go back onto, hold on one second. Go back onto my microphone because I'm still only at 1% for some reason. It should be more highly charged. I don't know. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know that was gorgeous, smart, yes. Oh, wait, I finally caught up to the chat. Do you know the difference in the ideology of FARC and ELN? No, Anthony, you'll have to explain it to me. Well, I was in everything. We can't think about stuff like that now. I don't know what you mean, Robert. It's funny that all the atheist and anti-Christian literature is written by Jews. There are plenty of secular Jews, atheistic Jews. There are plenty of atheistic Gentiles who write stuff. Foucault was not a Jew, for instance. Michel Foucault. Let me see. Darwin wasn't Jewish. If you're so I think that's kind of unfair. Anti-Christian literature. Mein Kampf. A lot of the Nazi literature is anti-Christian. Certainly not Jewish. Let me see here. Is the Dutch a combination of Germans and Brits? They're all similar. They're all Nordic Germanic peoples. Their languages are based on the Germanic languages, although English is heavily influenced by French and Latin, unlike German and Dutch. The Dutch develop a civilization separate. There's the land of Flanders, which becomes the basis for Belgium. For a long time, Belgium is called the Austrian Netherlands or the Spanish Netherlands. They're controlled by different empires. And eventually, after Napoleon, Belgium is created to be a dividing mark between France and the Holy Roman Empire, or Germany later on. The Dutch existed as a country with independence from the Spanish in the 17th century. Germany didn't exist at that point, still the Holy Roman Empire. German was the culture and language. But good question, E-Dog. Who were the Egyptians? Ancient Semitic and North African people who settled in the Nile River Valley, the upper Nile being in the south, the lower Nile being near the Mediterranean Sea. Do you think Constantinople would have survived had the Venetians sent help quicker? Possibly, but I don't think the Venetians could have stopped the war machine, the imperial siege by the Ottomans. They were too good at that. The Ottomans' best military tactic was their ability at siege warfare. Their use of cannon fire was the perfected version of basically the premier tank of the 15th century, the premier artillery or howitzer or whatever you want to call it. If you had to just guess how long it would take for the leftists to control government to enforce veganism, I don't want to guess that. I don't know if there are plenty of leftists who eat meat, and leftists throughout history have not been vegetarians. To be fair, Hitler was a vegetarian. What places did Nazis justify the takeover of and believing that archaeology proved places that Aryans lived on? The Middle East, North Africa. That's part of the reason why they go into North Africa. It's kind of the basis in the inspiration for Indiana Jones. Did you ever research the Urgon, Hongron, and the other group yet? Oh, the Uragan. You mentioned it just yesterday, so I haven't had time, but they're apparently bad Israeli groups that became the basis for the IDF that committed terrorist acts against the British during the last World War. Okay. Let me see here. Why did Alexander not complete the conquest of Indian subcontinent? The Indians defeated him, and before he could go back, his soldiers demanded he return. They actually mutiny against him. Watch my video on Alexander to learn more. Were the Bolsheviks ultimately beneficial or harmful for Russia? Harmful. Watch my video, my most recent video, long-form video about the Russian Revolution. Harmful, definitely harmful. But I mean, obviously they had ideas. They changed Russian civilization and society. And of course, eventually they industrialized Russia and helped them defeat the Germans in the last World War. So it's not every single last thing that the Bolsheviks and communists do in every single country is wrong. Not every single last thing. They are authoritarians. They are repressive. They destroy free speech and rights, and they kill lots of people. Not every single last thing that an authoritarian government does is wrong. And the authoritarian governments are often quite effective at getting what they want in pretty brutal fashion. Stalin does it, Hitler does it, yes. Mussolini does it, Mao does it. Be they communist or socialist or fascist or Nazi, they can be extraordinarily effective at getting done what they want. And this is why people are now saying, oh, Hitler was really cool or Stalin was impressive. You got to admire. No, you don't have to admire that. These are evil things that they did through evil means. You can be impressed by the achievements of the 4-year plans under Goering in Germany or Stalin's 5-year plans. But looking at the brutality that achieved it gives much more context that makes you realize that is not worth it unless you have some utilitarian leanings. At the same time, another thing to consider is a lot of people who are impressed with the pageantry of these people who often appear in military uniforms don't understand the reason they wore these military uniforms was to prove that they were military. They would use their military to kill every single person they could who would get in their way, even their own people. And I watched a really good video today about the Holodomor. Stalin killed far more people than Hitler did. Stalin repressed his people for far longer than Hitler ever did, and yet we continue to believe that Hitler was worse than Stalin. No, Stalin was worse than Hitler. Does that make Hitler any better? No, it just makes Stalin that much worse. There, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. What do you think America should do today to make life better? Oh boy. Find a way to figure out this cost of living and limiting credit card debt, because debt is a way people enslave themselves. What happened to the Lombards? They were conquered by Charlemagne. He incorporated them into their empire. Did it make Hitler crazy? No, amphetamines did. The Nazis loved the use of methamphetamines. At one point, Hitler was homeless. True, he was a homeless Austrian painter. Kind of a little more of a soy boy than you might think. For all those people who love the Nazi pageantry and love the uniforms and think it's really, pretty cool, as some idiots on the internet say, if you don't like leftist soy boys, you might not like Hitler, because Hitler called himself a socialist all the time. Give me the history of how hate crime became a thing in the U.S. Isn't murdering someone automatically means there is enough hate in your heart? Hate crimes refer to hatred based off of racial principles. These were defined by groups like the SCLC, the NAACP, and of course the Anti-Defamation League, which of course I know for a lot of people are buzzwords for Jew, 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 and all of this stupid nonsense. But the truth of the matter is, hate crimes are demonstrable actions of hatred towards different groups of people that are different from you. The people who generally suffer from this the most in the United States are Jews. African Americans do, although it seems a lot less likely that white people are ever victimized by this, although they are. So hate, it's based off of racial and ethnic undertones as well as political undertones. And bigotry, it has less to do with actual hatred and the ability to kill someone. But yes, you are technically, I guess, true morally. Do you have autism? I take that as a compliment when people ask, but I do not. Will the change of our food pyramid be a significant time in history? No, because the last food pyramid probably is turning out not to be significant, and our understanding of food changes as time goes on. Which of the Indiana Jones movies is your favorite? Last Crusade. Do you think they would drop the bomb? Who would? And what bomb? Didn't some Lombard duke establish Sicily? Yes. The Lombards conquer large sections of Italy following the fall of the Romans. Explain the difference between, and that's why Charlemagne goes in there. Explain the difference between a country's property versus state. Wouldn't it make sense to add more stars to the flag to represent the totality? No. Territories might become states. They might be sold off. They don't have the permanence that a state does for the U.S. They haven't ratified the Constitution. Did you know that the spinach that Popeye ate was actually amphetamines? Sounds about right. Is it edgy to say that Hitler, Stalin, Roosevelt, Churchill, and de Gaulle were all crazy and bad in their own right? It's edgy, it's cool, it gets you on Tucker Carlson so you can say something stupid and then have a BS Substack. All these people did bad things. Churchill starved people in India. Roosevelt put the Japanese in internment camps. De Gaulle wasn't as bad. De Gaulle didn't have as much power as those other men. Give someone power, they can do bad things. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. George Washington had slaves. Alexander the Great killed thousands of people. People do terrible things, but look at the scale, look at the intention, look at the outcome, look at the devastation. I think I sleep better at night knowing Hitler and Stalin are on a different category altogether than Roosevelt or Churchill. World debt is over 300 trillion. To who? I'm a Christian nationalist. What does that even mean at this point? How do you know Jewish groups get over 90% of DHS security grants? Did you know Jewish groups get over 90% of DH security grants? Do you know that probably about 90% of groups that are called Jewish groups are just groups that happen to be run or started by Jews who, the ipso facto of Jewishness is one of the big issues that I have with all of this stuff. It's, this person is a Jew and they started this and therefore Jews are responsible. No, that's nonsense. That's like saying this Irishman started this, so the Irish started the IRA, therefore all Irish people are bad. Get over yourself. And yes, anti-Semitism comes everywhere. Jews today aren't even Semitic. Oh, goodness gracious. Corn Plum's here. Great. So we've decided to go the whole anti-Semitic route at the end of the live stream. Fan-frickin-tastic. Yeah, de Gaulle did do bad things in Algeria. That's true. The Algerian War. And, of course, also that includes Dien Bien Phu and their efforts to force the Indochinese to continue as French subjects. Are the Assyrians the leftovers of the Persian Empire? No. The Assyrians are descended from an ancient people called the Aramaeans. They are different than the Assyrians. In 2003, Nelson Mandela accused the U.S. of committing atrocities and ignoring the rule of law. Would you agree? The U.S. has done it many times. So has South Africa. Are you still falling for the spectacle, thinking it's truth, Mr. History? Are you still overly focused on a group of people that you do not identify with and hate? Why is it that anti-Semites like you are anti-Jews or whatever, anti-Zionists or whatever you want to call yourself today, why are you more obsessed with Jews than Jews are? The only people who care more about Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel and the Jews are anti-Semites. And Muslims who want to kill them. So there's that too. Was the South still part of the U.S. despite trying to secede? No. It's a different country. The U.S. wins the Civil War by destroying the Confederacy. Is guessing more annoying than trying when it comes to teaching? I'm not guessing. It could be, but I don't do either. Do you think Cuba would have been better off with Batista, or was Castro's revolution necessary? There was actually some economic reforms that Batista was trying to do. He was supposed to leave power, but he really wasn't. I just think it's just it's a different side of the same coin. The disingenuity of communist governments like Fidel Castro and Vladimir Lenin, though, I think is a point against them, because at least with the monarchies or dictatorships of Batista and Tsar Nicholas II, which I talk about a lot in my Russian history videos, you have a very, very good conception of this is an autocracy. The others say that they are the dictatorship of the proletariat. Doesn't happen. Who's your favorite author? Dostoevsky. Was Andrew Jackson ever disciplined for getting into Spanish Florida, and what made him so popular? His ability to act so quickly and defeat Indians. He went in there because of the Seminole Indians, ostensibly. He was never punished. In fact, he was basically rewarded by the U.S. getting Florida. It vindicated him and helped him launch his presidential bid in 1824. When his history was the good old days. There are no good old days. It's a concept people convince themselves of because they don't like the way the world is now. They like certain aspects of what they call the good old days, but they don't like all of it. Because the 1950s that you love has segregation. That's bad. That's not a good thing, by the way. Some people on the internet are so quick to justify that they want to go there. But the good old days have horrible, horrible things you haven't thought of, like child labor, human sacrifice, and other terrible things. Do Syrians like Jews? Not usually. Oh my goodness, somebody is using the Bible, which is John 8:39 to 47, Synagogue of Satan. Somebody's using the Bible to attack Jews. The Bible that was written by Jews for Jews. Wow, amazing. Have you ever done a DNA test, friendly history, or do you know your general family ancestry? The latter. Mandela was a terrorist. That's true. The ANC does start off the Spear of a Nation. Shuriken, one of the great friendly neighborhood historians, and there's many people who've been on this channel for a long time who become friendly neighborhood historians, and you can as well if you just like and subscribe, brought up, was the one who taught me about Spear of a Nation. They were extraordinarily aggressive and basically terroristic at some points. Epstein was Jewish, if you've never heard of him, but heard just his voice, you'd know he's Jewish. Wow. Jeffrey Epstein was Jewish. Marx was Jewish. Are you going to mention that Trotsky was Jewish next? How about, who next? Alfred Kinsey? I don't think Kinsey was Jewish, but I've heard people, but I'm sure that he's or Freud was Jewish, or all these bad people in history are Jews. Do you know who else was Jewish? Jesus. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of these people who make these anti-Jewish statements are Christians or Catholics. I don't know why on the far right this is happening when radical Islam and the far left, which is very secular, tend to hate Jews. Also, because of Israel's actions in Gaza, which is kind of different but not. It's kind of the same horseshoe theory. It's proving horseshoe theory to be true between the left and the right, matching at the end of the day. I don't know why, but it's like the man who starts your religion, who you believe is God, was a Jew. All of his followers were Jew. If you are a Catholic, the first popes were Jews. The New Testament is written primarily by Jews. Christians in the New Testament worship at the Jewish temple even after Jesus dies. How do you do this? How do you practice this mental disassociation? If you're not a Christian and you're just secular, then okay, I guess you could just be a conspiracy theorist. But a lot of this anti-Jewish stuff is coming from people who are proudly Catholic or proudly right-wing Christians or stuff like this. It's nonsense. Those pictures of happy Venezuelan people are found to be deep fakes from last year. Oops, fooled again. Okay, then. Whatever, I don't even know what you're talking about. How much has Christ influenced over culture? Have you read Tom Holland's Dominion? Jesus is the most influential person in human history. It shouldn't be a debate, but it is for some reason because people, and usually they're showing their anti-Christian bias. I don't reveal my religion. I'm not talking about this from a religious perspective. I'm saying from a historical perspective, you can't shake the impact that Jesus of Nazareth has had on the world. It's that serious. Tom Holland can realize it, and he's an atheist, so I can realize it too. I love Jews and have Jewish family, but I hate dictators. BB fits that bit on board. See, Natalie, that's fair. You can have that perspective about Netanyahu. We can have a conversation about that. I don't necessarily agree, but that doesn't mean that I'm automatically in support of genocide and that I'm a Zionist paid by AIPAC. But people believe that because for them it's Jew, 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 like Alex Jones says. So, I'm not quoting him, I'm deriding him because he's an idiot. But in 1979, the Ayatollah Khomeini described the Shah of Iran as a bloodsucker. What would be the description of the current manifestation of the Pahlavi family? The son of bloodsucker. And the Islamic government of Iran has done a lot of blood-sucking itself, killing 700 protesters. So, most, if not all, revolutions are well-intentioned and can have good attributes. The best laid plans of mice and men often go bad. Luke the physician was Greek. Did he use opium? He might have. You're referring to Luke from the Bible, of the New Testament? Yeah, and that is one example. But if you read the New Testament, I believe he actually becomes a Jew. Is what Trump did the same as Reagan? In Grenada, it is comparable. Overthrowing a government that you don't like and that's communistic. Yeah, actually, that's a good comparison, Henry. My favorite author is probably Tom Clancy. Good choice. What are the chances that Iran turns to democracy even though they've never known democracy? Small. Segregation actually was not bad. I don't know. I've just known a lot of great black people, and I like sitting with them at restaurants. But call me old-fashioned. I like drinking from a nice water fountain and then letting them drink from the same water fountain. But I don't know. But Israel can have an ethno-state. I don't want to get too involved in this. I've already gone way over time, and I should wrap it up. I'm just trying to catch up to the chat. Yes, the same way the Irish can have an ethno-state, the same way the British can have an ethno-state, the same way the French and the Syrians and the Saudis and the Arabs can have an ethno-state, and the Egyptians can have an ethno-state. Yes, the Jews can have an ethno-state. What's wrong with that? Does that mean the Palestinians can't? No. Do Jews like Syrians? Do hamsters like mice? I don't know. The Bible was written only for Jews. The Bible was written by Jews, and a lot of it was originally for only Jews. So sigh up again, pulling everyone into the spectacle. I still pray you will get it, dude. Thank you. I appreciate your prayers. I mean, call me crazy, but when someone who is throwing conspiracy theories in my face says, I'll pray for you, I tend to doubt those prayers will be effective. Do you think Mormonism could be the correct religion? When we find those golden plates, I'll be a little more convinced. What do you think of the work of Julius Evola? Don't know it. Do you have Instagram? Yes, we do have Instagram. Friendly History. I don't know the exact handle, but we have our social medias there, TTP. Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. You can also follow us on Discord for further discussions. Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Israeli Secret Service, for Mossad. It's possible. There are bad people and bad things that Mossad has done, just like the CIA and MI6 and FSP. Why is it only Mossad we want to focus on? And when we focus on the CIA, we only want to focus on the CIA and the Jews. Why? Why this specialization, the special pleading of only the Jews, only the Jewish secret service, only the Jewish government, only the Jews can do? Every country does what the Jews do, but the Jews get far more attention for what they do, which kind of implies to me that a lot of it's because of anti-Semitism, but what do I know? But Jesus would hang out with Greek people. Yes, I'm not saying that Jews should not hang out with Greek people. This channel needs an Alex Jones Jew emoji. The topic gets rattled constantly by silly commentators. Yes, I do love that video. It's hilarious watching an idiot yell, but it is funny. I should do an Alex Jones doing that emoji. Jesus was not a Jew if he was Christianity would not exist. Jews' central belief is the denial of Christ. No, that's not Jews' central belief. The Jews' central belief is in one God. It's called monotheism. Don't know if you know about it, but yeah. I prefer Jews to Muslims, even though I've never met a Jew. I don't have Jews ripping me off. I don't have Jews livering me. I don't have Jews talking bad stuff about my bloodline. Well, you're in the minority because everyone on this channel who hates Jews will say that's what Jews do all the time. Apparently, this is all the Jews ever do. I've spent plenty of time with Jews. I know that's a bunch of nonsense, but who cares what I think? Because I'm obviously either a Jew or paid by Jews. Which is funny because if I was paid by Jews, I wouldn't be at 3% without my microphone right now. Just saying. TV says it's true. Jews. History book says it's true. Jews. Our leaders say it's true. Crypto Jews. Jew. Knock it off. Seriously. This is a history channel. Why is it? Why? Why do we do this? I'm a conservative Christian. I certainly don't hate Jews. No one should hate anyone. Here's a crazy idea. Was Gaddafi a revolutionary, visionary, or a tyrant, or why? Starts off as one, ends up as another. Not uncommon. Thank you, Gorgonite. Do you think ethnicities have a different mindset? What makes Jewishness so interesting for them to have so much influence on our history? Whose history? You mean the history of Jewish people in the Gentile world? Yes, they have a lot of influence on Jewish people. What was so special about Picasso's paintings? Basically reinvents Impressionism in his own image, bringing Cubism to the mainstream, creating an entire branch of art. Fascinating guy. Which one was worse? Slavery that included integration, living on white people's property and communities, or Jim Crow that instilled segregation? Oh, good question, Tom. I think probably the pastoralism of slavery is still worse. And we got a super chat. User, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for the super chat. You're so kind. We are self-sustained here, by the way. All the money that you give us goes back into this channel to make it as good as it possibly can be. Modern American conservatism fundamentally incompatible with Christianity. That's what a lot of people say. He's obviously Jewish. Yes, clearly Jewish. Yes, totally Jewish. He entered the first covenant and brought the second covenant with the gospel. The biblical Israel is the Christian church. See, that's your religious perspective, and you're allowed to have that. But that's not historically what the case is. The case is historically, whatever Christians want to say about it, is Jews are, all the New Testament leaders were Jews. All the early popes in Catholicism are Jews. Christianity is a Jewish sect that believes that Jesus is Mashiach, the Messiah, the deliverer. And they believe he died and rose again. And that what separates them from the Jews is that he rose again and that he was God, in their opinion. So, we Zulu want our land back. This is our place. Okay. Will you give it to the other African tribes that you took it from? It seems your defense of the Jews isn't going well. Jew. Oh, knock it off. They say the descent that created Islam are related to Ishmael. Yes, supposedly Islam claims direct connection to Christianity and Judaism through Abraham, the father of faith and the father of the Jewish people, by saying that Ishmael was the blessed child, not Isaac. Jews killed JFK. Claim, no evidence, claim, no evidence, claim, no evidence, claim, no evidence, claim, no evidence. And all these claims seem to be about the same group of people. History makes more sense in a secular perspective. If you want to I think it makes more sense in a skeptical perspective. You step back and look at what's going on through a skeptical lens. You don't just automatically believe the narrative of one side or another. You actually look at all the different perspectives of all these different people. But I don't know if you have to be a skeptic or you have to be secular to say that. But you need to be willing to not place religious value and context ahead of historical precedent, because then you get people like the people we have in chat right now. 109 nations kicked them out. Those people were just mean and anti-Semitic. A lot of them were. I'm not saying that Jews have never done anything bad. Tons of people get kicked out of countries. Look at what happened to the Irish. I mean, Irish and dogs need not apply. The British have kicked the people out of their countries first. That's all the British Empire is. Here, this is ours now. A lot of you need to get out now. Diaspora happens to more than just Jews. Look at the blacks. Look at Africans. Taken from their continent, taken to Europe, South America, Central America, and North America. That's diaspora. That's being kicked out of their countries. Is that their fault? Well, it's the fault of some of their leaders and the fault of the Europeans and the Arabs who enslaved them. But come on. Being expelled from your country is part of history. Sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's other people's fault. A lot of the time, it's other people's faults. I read history, not fiction. Let me see. I don't support it in Yahoo, but I support Israel being the Jewish homeland. The Jewish have been there since they were Canaanites, since Yahweh was an obscure god of war. Okay, you're allowed to believe that. This is pre-recorded. Yes, clearly pre-recorded. Do liberals want to spread democracy around the world? If so, how do you think make Islamic nations democratic? Neoliberals and neoconservatives want democracy because they think it's the best system, but I just don't see how that works, is compatible with countries that have never had. It's not about being Islamic or Christian. It's, have you had democracy? Can you live with democracy? Some Islamic countries can do democracy. Malaysia, Indonesia, but not the Middle East. You've got radical Islam, and you have much more dictatorial regimes that are based on ancient kingdoms, like in Persia, which is Iran, and of course Saudi Arabia. Could there be an ethical monarchy? There have been in the past, but they are very hard. This is pre-recorded. He is a fake rage better. Yes, clearly. History always tells two stories. No, history tells lots of stories. Yes, you are allowed to love Jesus and Jews. My favorite author is Kafka, but his body of work is so limited, he died young. Jewish. Kafka was Jewish. Okay. If I treated women the same way as MLK did, I would be in jail. Probably not. We'll do a live stream lecture on MLK next Sunday for MLK Day. Guys, desperate for money. I got one super chat. Yeah, I'm desperate for money, clearly. Why do Muslims hate Jews? Muslims don't hate Jews. Although the Middle East, a lot of Middle Eastern Muslims certainly do. Either they want to kill them, like Hezbollah and Hamas, or they would be perfectly fine with them being wiped out. That's why Mein Kampf is the most popular book in the West Bank and Egypt. Didn't know that? Read more. What would America have as an ethnic state? America, I don't think, can be an ethnic state. There is not one ethnicity that starts America. I guess you could say the Angloids, but yeah. We took Venezuela because China was in there to take that oil. Yeah, there is a lot of geopolitical reasons why the United States attacks Venezuela and overthrows Maduro. A lot has to do with Taiwan. I love edgy comments sometimes, but I hope you see me as monthly. Yes, you are extremely level-headed, Gaihan. Is the CIA controlling Venezuela? Probably not. I think the Book of Mormon is true. Believe whatever you want. This does seem pre-recorded. Yeah, sure. I think you're the rage baiter. Mossad has trained American police post 9/11. Wow. What does that mean? Oh, nothing. Yeah, never mind. Had Martin Luther King not been assassinated, would not have been his role in American history. I don't know what you mean by that. Have been this role of the USA of today? I don't know what you mean. Are you a Mossad agent? Clearly, I am. What's going on with Mossad? I don't know. I haven't been to a meeting in a while because we're finding out more and more that the message in the Israeli government is evil. Clearly, guilt is not equal. Only the evil want to hide from rebuke. I'm not hiding from anything. Teaching is really repetitive. Repeat. He's got to teach or have it for real. October 6th, most of the people killed were by the hands of the IDF. It's October 7th, and that is not true. I mean, I've actually read the testimony of the people who were there and the people who killed them. It's not true. That's all nonsense. That's all been disproven. But thank you for showing your ignorance. You forgot Joseph Stalin was Jewish, arguably the worst murderer. Stalin was not Jewish. Trotsky and Lenin were Jews, but not Stalin. And by the way, Mao was the worst murderer in human history by numbers. Pol Pot by proportionality of population. Neither were Jews. Interesting. Let me see. They spit on Christians in Israel. Sometimes. Not all of them. Most of them don't. So what? Oh, wow. Would a Christian prefer to be in Saudi Arabia or Israel? Just a quick question. Would a Christian prefer to be in Saudi Arabia or in Israel? I think I can tell you which one he would prefer to be in. Just saying. These people who come on, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because no one on this channel ever comes in and says this about Muslims. Actually, some people do. But it's always the Jews. Because for some reason, this is important. For some reason, this is all we want to talk about. Slavery was ended by America, and so was Jim Crow. What are we focusing on today to make life better together? Look at what we're feeding our minds, hearts, and souls today, so unite and rise up above the lies and evil today. Yes, I absolutely agree with you, sir. And that's a great place to end the chat, and thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. At the end of the day, realize something. The West deserves a lot of criticism for the oppression and evil that they wrought in the lives of non-Western, non-white people for centuries. Close to a millennia, more than half a millennia now. But the truth of the matter is that it was also the West that abolished most of the institutions that oppressed these people, like slavery, and fought to the enslavement of these people by the Arabs, for instance, and did what they could the same white people, the same Americans who created Jim Crow, not the exact same, but those Americans also ended Jim Crow and fought to end apartheid. So it's possible to overcome. We shall overcome is possible. Do you think our culture will ever build systems that aren't solely nonprofit? Possibly. How much are you getting paid? Not enough. You can pay me anytime you want. You afraid your account will get flagged? Yes. Yes, very terrified. I'm shaking in my boots. I've had comments, videos removed, flagged for all sorts of stuff I've said. What religion do you think is most believable? I don't want to say. I'm not going to share my religion. All Mormons are bad. Yes. Let's just be racist now. Is the Shah ingrained into society in Iran as a culture? Yes. The Shah is the ancient word for ruler. 109 countries. Just saying. Yes. And by the way, the same anti-Semitism that undergirds many of your comments and questions is exactly why they've been removed from 109 countries. Did it ever occur to you that anti-Semitism might be the responsibility? And yes, there's plenty of other history other than Jews. I wish people would talk more about that. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Probably the chicken. We destabilized the entire Middle East on behalf of Israel. Not one occasion has Israel ever helped us in any conflict. A, that is not true. B, that is not true. Neither of those points are true. C, the U.S. did that not at the behest of Israel, but at their own desire. So, let me see here. Yeah. I meant to say profit, not non-profit, but my phone is crazy. No worries. Still the same answer. Jews are the most anti-Semitic people to ever exist because they're not even Semites. Sometimes, this is why I'm not against banning free speech. This is why I'm a free speech absolutist. Sometimes the stupidity writes itself. No offense, but sorry. Oh, and Scarapon is finally a member. Thanks to you, Tanya. I really appreciate the gift. Why can't we criticize Jewish misbehavior in many states of the U.S. codified by state law? Large Jewish populations in America. But Jews in Israel should be criticized if they do bad things. So should everybody. I've criticized Israel many times on this channel. I know you don't believe that because you think that it's either one way or another. And if I'm not criticizing Israel daily, I'm a Mossad agent. But Israel has done a lot of terrible things. Lavon, USS Liberty, which probably was a mistake, but was a horrible mistake nonetheless. The actions in Gaza are very questionable a lot of the time. No, not to people who actually understand how history and war work, but it's still morally uproarious to see. Peter had anger management issues, and Moses had a fear of public speaking. Are we just going to Bible stuff? Bills or Jags? Bills. I think they're going to do the upset. I'm just glad the Steelers made it. Who cares? You all suck. Thank you, Lenny. We can agree with that. The whole point of Jesus being a Jew was not to say that they are more special. It was to say that he was humble enough to be just another sun-baked Jew, and that was the lesson. What? No, the whole point is to say that Jews produce, if you want to argue that Jews produce bad people, if you're a Christian especially, how can you argue with the Jews producing Jesus? So you want to say that this person was Jewish, and therefore Jews equal bad. But Jesus of Nazareth is a Jew. Jews do not always equal bad. What happened with the USS Liberty? The Israelis attacked it. And during their war, the Six-Day War, the Americans sent their ship there. They may not have known that the USS Liberty was a U.S. ship. They may have thought it was an Egyptian ship. I have read differing accounts on that. But either way, a lot of American sailors were killed by the Israelis in either a false flag operation, a psyop, or a complete misunderstanding. It's one of the stupidest and worst things Israel has ever done. There you go. Do you think our government avoids responsibility for bad things? Every government does. And it's to continue to get people to do what they want. The Bible is actually one of the best books ever, full of history and poetry and parables. It's pretty deep and complex, to be sure. Let me see here. Conspiracy sheep, yes. Look at the Polynesians. I don't know what I should. Who was the most influential, Socrates or Plato? Socrates, because he writes what Plato said. You should be on Turning Point USA. No, I shouldn't. The disciple John was the only one of Jesus' followers to have died a natural death. Do you think he may have been shirking the workload to avoid attention? I don't know. A lot of that is Christian tradition, and a lot of that comes from like 200 years later. I have no idea. It's Eusebius's writings that only are able to be written after Constantine legalizes the church in the early 4th century. Jews killed Charlie Kirk. Yes, the Jews could have killed Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens, but they killed Charlie Kirk. Clearly, because Charlie Kirk was so anti-Israel. Who owned the boats in the slave trade? Some of them were Jews, some of them were Arabs, some of them were Muslims. The Arabs and the Muslims started it. The Christians continued it. Jews owned ships. Wow, Jews did bad things? Shock. Do you think Oswald was alone? No. Oh, there goes my lighting. Let me see here. Okay. There. Okay. So my laptop died, which is where my lighting sources are from. So, oh well. That's a pretty good sign that I need to wrap it up. And I still haven't caught up all the way to the chat. So I'm sorry if I haven't been able to answer all of your questions. Please come back tomorrow. We might have time at the end to answer questions about history and social studies. Hopefully only that and not a bunch of stuff about different ethnicities that we all hate for some strange reason. Please like and subscribe on your way out. Check out all the content on the channel. Thank you for joining us at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I really enjoyed this and all the conversation. We will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern for a live stream lecture on a topic of your choice. You can vote here on YouTube and get your topic selected. And if you want another topic, put it in the comments there on that post. So I hope everybody takes care and has a great rest of your Saturday. And hopefully you do something incredibly brilliant and not spend all of your time focused on a bunch of people that you do not know, namely the Jews. And hopefully you actually think about yourself and about history and about social studies. And if you want to be focused on the Jews and all of that Israel stuff, you can watch videos here where I have tons of information about the Middle East, including a live stream lecture and an extensive history about the rise of Islam in one of my many long form videos, and the short form videos I can produce every day just for you guys, cover all of these topics as well. Please like and subscribe. Take care. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. Go out with your friends and impress them with the history knowledge that you have learned here. And always like and subscribe. And I want to thank user for being a W user, being a W friendly neighborhood historian, which you can be by liking and subscribing, for his super chat. Really appreciative. Yes, Arabs are Semitic. I'm very well aware of that. Go Packers. We'll see what happens. Take care. Have a great rest of your evening. And as always, love history. Bye-bye now.